want to introduce our next guest. Now, he's a professor of geriatric medicine and neurology at Dalhousie University. He's a leading expert on frailty. He has more than 400 peer-reviewed publications, and he's written 9 books. His work on frailty and aging is among the world's most cited research, in fact, in the top 100%. And you know what? He's still an active physician in Halifax. Dr. Kenneth Rockwood is a rock star in the field of aging, and he's going to talk about death. Specifically, is it good to die healthy? Now, please welcome Dr. Kenneth Rockwood.
Thank you. I'm here today wearing a couple of hats. One is to let you know that Nova Scotia Health has started a frailty and elder care network, and I think this is a great advance, and I'll talk to you more about that in a minute. So I have one disclosure. I'll talk a little bit about a thing called the clinical frailty scale. We make it available freely, but we had to assert copyright to prevent people from charging for it. And I have a we company which still exists, but I won't be talking about anything to do with that today. So here's what I want to talk to you about. I want to ask, what does it mean to die healthy? And if we're going to understand that, we have to think about how mortality risk works out in old age. And that will lead us to a discussion of how frailty arises. And that the very important challenge of what does that mean for the way we provide healthcare now, including long-term care? And then I know a lot of people say, there must be a nicer word, and I want to address that towards the end. So I'm going to show you just a few graphs. I know that if you don't explain a graph properly, it kind of hides more than it shows. So here's the way to look at this. These are data from the UK with a thing called the Frailty Index, and I'll talk to you a bit more about that in a minute. And the Frailty Index is more or less a count of the number of things that people have wrong with them expressed as a fraction. And because no one can have everything wrong with them, you'll die before that happens. The lowest value, the healthiest you can be on this, is a score of 0. And the highest that you can be is not a score of 1, as you might think. It's actually a score of about 0.67, because after that, it's very hard to survive. So on the x-axis here is age, from age 65 to 95. And on the y-axis here is survival from about 1,800 days. So what, 5 years survival. So what we're going to show you next is the information about survival portrayed as a heat map. So green is the fittest people and red is the frailest folks. And here's what that map looks like. So let's just take here in the top, this is the fittest person age 65. Very few of them died, but even very fit 95-year-olds died right out the gate within just a few hundred days. And you can also see that there's a lot of variability the older people get compared to when people are young. You can also see that the lethality of frailty, so this is higher frailty down here, the lethality increases as age increases, and the variability increases as age increases. And all of that's important for how we think about frailty and aging. And it also means that we know that some 95-year-olds, the fittest 95-year-olds, on average will not live as long as the healthiest 65-year-old. So age winds up mattering, which is not surprising. But it also means that a lot of older people, a lot of very old people are dying healthy. And the question is that a good thing? And if it is, what can we do to enhance more of that? So the question is, where does aging come from? So aging comes from your cells, and it's very characteristic, and it affects cells throughout the body, not all at the same rate, but in general, people have a characteristic way in which they accumulate damage within the cells. And if you look at young cells with a low damage level, then there's a whole bunch of processes that give rise to growth, and others proliferation, and they're held in a creative tension here. Certain things happen, chromosomes have certain characteristics, and so on and so on. This is something that goes on over which we have not no control, but very little control. And as people age, then these things change, and there'd be characteristic features of an old cell. But the trick is that not everybody who has the old cell will be of the same age. That's where frailty comes from. It comes from, if you will, an acceleration in aging, particularly compared with others your own age. And one of the reasons this is tremendously important, and it's a thing we need to talk about, is because frailty increases the risk of, someone's requesting remote control of my screen, I'm giving it to them, hopefully that's a good thing. So frailty increases the risk of things that go with disease actually turning into disease. And we've started to learn a lot about this in the last several years. And we've particularly learned a lot about this in respect of how Alzheimer's disease works. So when I was a boy, when I went to medical school first, or even before that, in the 70s, we were taught that that autopsy was the only way, it was the gold standard way to make a diagnosis of dementia. And that if you looked under the microscope, you could tell who had dementia and who didn't. And in 1984, I was very privileged to spend time one summer in a neuropathology lab at the University of Western Ontario, as it then was, which at the time was one of the most prestigious spots in North America to do this type of work. And what became evident there was when you looked down the microscope, you could tell who had the hallmarks of dementia, the plaques and the tangles and the atrophy and those sorts of things, but you couldn't really tell whether that person had dementia or not. And that was something that was revealed by the community-based autopsy studies. And it was a really intriguing conundrum. How come some people who look like they should have dementia don't? And how come some people who don't look like they should have dementia based on their brain, their gold standard, how come they do? And as the understanding has evolved, and a lot of this work has come from our group, and particularly a young scholar here called Lindsay Wallace, who did a lot of this work in her PhD, it turns out that this mismatch between who gets dementia and who does not, part of it for sure is explained by whether you have a healthy brain under the microscope. But here's the thing, even people who have an unhealthy brain under the microscope, their risk of dementia can be fairly low, not as low as this, but can be fairly low if they're fit, if they're physically fit. And if they have a low degree of frailty, they're less likely to express the neuropathology of dementia, even when it's there. And this, I think, is something that is giving us a new understanding of how to look at prevention of many common late life diseases in old age. So that's partly why I think it's really important that we study frailty, even if it's got a curious name. Okay, so here, I want to make sure I understand what's happening here. So the objectives then I wanted to talk about first. I want to ask what it means to die healthy. I want to consider what mortality risk is like in old age, and I want to say how frailty arises. And basically, to die healthy means to die with few things wrong. But it also means to die peacefully and peaceably. The difference between them is that the peaceful death is one in which the person themselves is not physically discomforted. The peaceable death is the one in which they have reconciled themselves to their friends and families and enemies, and they're able to approach the end of life with a glad heart. And that is not something you have to be fit to do. Even frail people can die peaceably and peacefully. But this idea that it might be better to die without a long period of suffering in between is something that there's a lot of consideration being given to now, including in basic science studies, which begin to suggest that it may be possible to extend the period of health span, the time in which you're fitter rather than frailer, without very much extending the lifespan. So people would, in that way, die healthy. I bet that the audience will know who I'm talking about when I say Johnny Carson. And so there was a comedian on the Johnny Carson show one time, and it came up about how he'd like to die, and he said he'd like to die at age 95, shot by a jealous husband. So he was expressing crudely, but he was expressing this notion of dying peacefully, if not actually peaceably. But I prefer the approach taken by the Newfoundland political columnist and essayist Ray Guy, and he said that success is the older person who neither longs for nor fears death. And I think that the people who die healthier often have that opportunity to be in that state, to not be afraid to die, but not to long to die either. So that's what it means to die healthy. Mortality risk, as I've indicated, it increases with the number of things that people have wrong with them. It increases with that more than with chronological age. So the degree of frailty helps us understand why some people die sooner than other people do. Age is still important, but it's not the entire thing. And this arises chiefly from subcellular processes that have incomplete fidelity. So our bodies are fantastic, amazing. We have cells that make things work 99.999% of the time. But we have things that are happening to us millions of times a day. So that 0.0001%, that builds up with time. That is an important part of what it means to age. So now let's talk about that, the fact that there are varying degrees of fitness and frailty in the world with aging. And let's talk about how that challenges how we now provide health and social care, including, I hope I'll get time, long-term care. So here's some work with my friend and colleague, Arnold Mitnitzky, that we did. So it was Arnold and I who many years ago developed this idea of the frailty index to quantify frailty. And I speak to you today unexpectedly, having seen someone die healthy, and it was Arnold last night, and in an ICU for a short period of time, who carried a lot of the lessons that we had learned with him as he prepared for the ICU encounter, which came on reasonably unexpectedly within a very short period of time. And so I want to honor him today. So Arnold and I, ages ago, worked out how to think about frailty and how to quantify it. And you have to quantify things to manage them. And in science, you have to quantify things to understand them, to provide context for things that are seen, if nothing else, but also to understand frailty in and of itself. So here again, on the x-axis is age. From age, actually it starts below this 15 and goes on up to 100. And on the y-axis is a type of frailty index, which are 32 items. So no one got there, but you can see that what happens with age is that there's an increase in the number of things that people have wrong with them on average. And this rate goes on at a rate about 4.5% per year. And so many of you will be astute from a business standpoint, I'll bet, and you'll know that that will translate into, by the rule of 72, a doubling time of about every 15 years. And that turns out to be fairly convenient because aging actually starts from the standpoint of a gerontologist. Aging starts at the age of 15, because prior to that, the risk of death is still falling compared to what it was like the minute you were born. In fact, you have to live to be about 32 or 33 years old to have the same risk of death you had when you're 32 or 33 hours old. So that declines with time. So the first doubling time is between the ages of 15 and 30. And if you think about it, when you're 15 years old, you probably didn't know anyone, or not more than one person, who died of an illness. You may have known people who died of accidents or other things, but not of an illness per se. So when you're 15 years old, you got almost nothing wrong with you, and you double that to be 30, you still got almost nothing wrong with you. That's not the doubling time that counts. It's just like compound interest. In fact, it's exactly like compound interest. What's really important is the last doubling time. And for most people, the last doubling time is between the ages of 75 and 90. 75 and 90. There is another doubling time between the ages of 90 and 105, but for most of our history, that's been a negligible accounting error that doesn't have a lot of impact on our overall population statistics, though it may have something to do with healthcare. So these are data from the Canadian National Population Health Survey. It's 8 successive waves, and the error bars are generated in terms of change over that period of time. And you can see that there's very little fluctuation when people are young, but there's a great deal of fluctuation in average rates of things as people age, and that's a fundamental property of a complex system. So one of the things I've been very interested in for the last dozen years or so is this intersection between baseline frailty, what someone was like a couple weeks before they got sick, and what they're like when I would see them in the emergency department for the internal medicine consult service. And I was interested in this intersection between the severity of acute illness and the underlying degree of frailty. And so these data here, this is the best one to look at, the probability side of things. So here is the chance of dying from 0% to 80%. And here is divided by how ill someone is. So there's a CTAS score, the Canadian Triage Assessment Score scale. And when it's low, when the number is low, that means the degree of acuity is high. And when the number is high, 3 to 5, that means the severity of the acute illness is low. So if we take this as the reference, what happens when people really aren't that frail to start with, and they really aren't that ill, but they're ill enough to come into the hospital, we know at the QE2 that those people have a 5% mortality rate on average. When they're very sick, it actually is a bit smaller. They get more intensive care or whatever happens there. But look, when they're very sick and the degree of frailty is high, 50% of those people are dead within 30 days. So that top line of what happens is really straightforward. If you're really sick and you're pretty severely frail to start with, the chance of survival is poor. It's in between, which is hard to disentangle, and where a lot comes about that tells us we have to reform the way we provide care now. So the challenge of frailty is this. It's that this is the last doubling time for most people. And 2021 is the year in which the boomers, we boomers, are turning 75. The leading edge is turning 75. And the leading edge will then be 76 in the next year, and there'll be another group of 75-year-olds, and so on and so on and so on. So from a healthcare standpoint, we are at the beginning of a huge wave that will change how we provide, that must change how we provide healthcare. Hopefully it will, but we need to respond to it now. And one of the ways we need to respond is to stop setting up systems and treating people as though they should only have one thing wrong at a time. Because frail older adults, when they become severely ill, will have many things wrong all at once. And there's a lot of consequences that arise from that. I'm happy to take questions about that. But that's a challenge we have right now, is we have to change from this great success we've had by knowing more and more and more about single disease states, and develop a new way to think about it, about how we manage the complex illness when people have many things wrong all at once. So I said I'd talk about how frailty challenges the way we provide health and social care now, including long-term care. What I said, it's going to do this by sheer numbers. Buckle up. We're just seeing the beginning of this change. And because in its complexity, the complexity of frailty challenges the way we've had so much success in healthcare, which is looking at one thing at a time. The impact of aging on healthcare is profound, but it's more the degree of frailty that will give rise to in-hospital harm. And that's because we don't recognize disease as it presents when people are very severely ill, often when they're frail. And we've made care unnecessarily harmful through things like poor sleep and poor nutrition and not adequate attention to pain and no routine mobilization and so on and so on. So all of these things arise, but it's not inevitable they should. We just have to provide care better. So frailty helps us to manage risk. And by measuring frailty, we can have some means to manage it. And knowing frailty allows us to know how to mitigate it. And as we do that, we should be able to have impact on many of the diseases of late life. But we got to get started. We can't put this off any longer. And the other thing I want to make sure that we talk about is that the first 72 hours when someone's admitted to hospital are a critical time. It's packed with information. We have to learn how to process that information as a means of understanding prognosis. So we've talked about that it means to die healthy. One take on it is to die with few things wrong. I think the more important thing is to die peacefully and peaceably. Those things don't go together always, but they're often correlated. Mortality risk increases more with the number of things people have wrong with them than with their chronological age. It arises from subcellular processes. By sheer numbers, this is a big challenge for us, and we're just seeing the start of this right now. And it's going to challenge the way we provide care. And the final thing is, can we come up with a nicer word? And my view on it is, we didn't have the success we've had with cancer by denying that it was there. And so frailty is a thing. I think we've established that. It's a complex thing, and it's something that we're going to have to tackle, and we need not to ignore it. I'm going to stop now. Just as I do, I want to acknowledge that I've been funded in my career by a great number of sources. It's been really valuable support. I draw to attention the Fountain Family Innovation Fund and the Queen Elizabeth II Health Sciences Foundation, the Dalhousie Medical Research Foundation. They have been really good at investing in the high risk work that you need to do in order to advance care overall. They're also the QE2 Foundation and Dalhousie Medical Research Foundation are also named in Arnold's obituary. And for the colleagues and students, I've had this slide for ages. The work with Arnold has been fantastic, a huge privilege for me. So I thank all of them for their help and support, and I thank you for listening. Thank you very much.
Dr. Rockwood, thank you so much. And first of all, on behalf of everyone here, I'd like to extend our deep condolences about the death of your friend.
Thank you.
We have some questions, and I'm going to get to them right away. And I've got some questions too. So Ed Leach asked, how impactful are high stress levels on frailty?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'm going to be slightly roundabout in this because stress is actually a term of art in medicine. So I'm going to try and answer your question in a way that will take that into account. So a deficit arises, right? The frailty is we count deficits. We count things people have wrong with them. Deficits arise when you have damage that goes unremoved or unrepaired. So we can think about stress as any condition that gives rise to either a reduction in the ability to repair processes or an increase in the damage rate. And the classical example of this is to live in an impoverished environment, to personally not have access to the things that many of us take for granted in terms of shelter and food and a safe environment and so on. So that's stressful in the sense of the stress that people feel, but it's also stressful in the sense that it both promotes the rate of damage and it reduces the access to repair. It extends the recovery time is how that works. So stressful environments can give rise to an increase in the degree of frailty, even in people who don't particularly feel stressed themselves. So the psychological feeling of stress is an added burden, but there's a background component which is always operating there and which fits with sort of the physiological medical definition of stress. So stress doesn't help any of this is the short answer.
What are some medical tests that I should ask my doctor about as I age?
So the most important thing to start with is to think about, so as humans, we've evolved to have high order functions. High order function we have as humans are we engage with other people, so social engagement. We have opposable thumbs, so that means function. We have, the technical term is upright bipedal ambulation. So when that gives way, we have impaired balance, we fall, or we take to bed. Um, and we also have the ability to pay attention to a couple things at once. Not as many things as people think, but we have the ability to screen out much of the environment and focus on things, paying attention. And that starts to fail when people become impaired from a cognitive standpoint. So you can ask your doctor, but you can also reflect on, are you walking quickly? Do you have a good gait when you walk? Do you have a good stride? Do you feel balanced and so on? How is your balance? And are you doing all the things that you used to be able to do? And if you stop doing them, how come? Is it because you can't do it, or have you become kind of withdrawn from that? So the medical test that a doctor could order will be conditioned on what he or she imagines might be wrong with you. And it turns out there's comparatively few screening tests. There used to be this thing of the routine history and physical, and that's properly been set aside for instead the idea of screening people for things for which they may be at risk in the Western world, high blood pressure, for example. But the things that we can do are to, here's what it boils down to have a single strategy: exercise in groups, get the social engagement, and get the exercise itself. And the tests, I think, will be dictated by the specific circumstances that you have.
You're right. Exercise is so great. And that's why, as an older adult, I am doing all kinds of exercises just to keep this old body going. I have another question from Bill McDonald. He's saying, fascinating research. Are the findings of it informing current healthcare policy? And any examples of that?
Yeah. It's been a great privilege to do this work here. I spent my entire career here. Up till now, most of the health policy implications have been in other countries, but I'm delighted that we've got a frailty network here. And we're going to really take on this challenge. But the data I showed you from the UK, that heat map data, in the UK, this thing called the Frailty Index, which we developed here, they've turned into an electronic tool. The data are gathered routinely. They come from GP, as they're called there, GP records. They have an electronic health record system, which is quite robust. People come up with the Frailty Index score based on that. When they get it, the GP contracts mean there are certain things that they're obliged to do. They're asked to do more. They look at things like cognition and function and that sort of stuff as part of a routine assessment. Those are the things that we need to do to help us understand how to approach the complex problems of an aging population. So first you have to name frailty, then you have to stage it. People aren't either frail or not frail. There are degrees of frailty, as we saw in the variation in the colors on the heat map, and then you have to act in a way that's appropriate for that. And so I touch on a couple things in the slides, like going for an operation. People look at the idea of prehabilitation. They don't wait till after the operation to do rehab. They started ahead of time with the idea to become more fit by the time they have their surgery and so on. There are exercise programs that are routinely available for people. There are places where, for example, the police service took on the fear that a lot of people had. There's an Irish Celtic word that means apparently uh, the widow who peers out from behind the lace curtain. And it was a locally developed but now nationally spread innovation that the police officers in an area would go and get these widows and others to come out, and they'd all walk in groups, and they did it 100 times. They saw it was safe to do so, and then the policeman didn't have to be there anymore, and the police officer didn't have to be there anymore, and so they just kept on this thing. So we really want to take a very proactive approach to what happens when people age, and we have to have environments that nudge us towards exercise and nudge us towards social engagement. And it's likely we're going to see changes in our housing stock and hopefully changes in the cities and so on as we adapt to look for more successful aging in a more widespread way.
Hopefully. Thank you. Kel, I think it's Kel or Kyle Skinner is asking, can the impacts of frailty be reversed?
Yeah, so reversed is a heavy load, but they can be mitigated. And what the title is meant to say is they can also likely be compressed. So we're starting to have data with regards to that. The example I had planned to use before is a Canadian man called Ed Whitlock, who set the world record for the marathon at age 80, 81, 82, 83, 84, 85. When he set the record at age 85, he didn't know, and people were shocked to hear that within 6 months he died of metastatic prostate cancer. So it's virtually certain that he was developing that at the time he set the world record. I heard him interviewed a couple of months after, and part of the job that I have is with the memory clinic here, and it's just an occupational hazard. I hear someone on the radio and I start to think, that doesn't sound quite right. And because I heard him a bunch of times before, it's an Ed Whitlock fan, I recognized that he was actually starting to have word finding difficulty, and he's having difficulty completing his sentences and organizing them into paragraphs. He was still pretty good, but to the trained ear, you could tell that there was some change there. So a large number of things were beginning to happen with him. Part of the interview that caught my ear was he was complaining about losing weight, and he was a pretty thin guy to start with. So he's an example of someone who was very healthy right up until a few months before they died. And my friend Arnold would pretty much conform to that profile too. So it is possible. And one of the things that we want to promote is that when someone like that shows up in the emergency department, that we don't put ourselves in the false dichotomy of quote unquote do everything or do nothing. We need to have, we don't want to subject people to anything that they're not likely to benefit from that is likely to harm them. But we also can't tell that by looking at folks. And some people need this trial of a period in which over 2 or 3 days or 3 or 4 days, we'll start to understand whether this is going to work or not. And we have to have a system that allows us to say, if this doesn't work, we'll stop. We'll stop all these intensive things, all these weird medications we've got people on and intubating them and all this sort of stuff. We'll withdraw that in a humane way over a short period of time if it's not working. And that's not the traditional way that things have been done, where that's built into the plan right up front. That's called dynamic decision making. One of our young colleagues here, the guy's name is on the screen now, Sam Searle, is a geriatrician. He spent a few years in the UK doing a PhD, and part of his work has been looking at the dynamics of this, looking at how this actually operates, and what things can we observe and how can we arrange our data to present the information that allows us to help guide individual decision making. So this is the type of thinking that is so innovative it sounds like common sense, right? Don't do things that people aren't benefiting from. That's really tricky in the way we've evolved to provide care now. We have to change that, and I'm hoping that this is one of the ways in which our province can make headway. We've been through an internationally challenging public health emergency, and we've done well. And I think we have to bring that same spirit of optimism and ability to change. I mean, we changed things at Nova Scotia Health in days that previously would have taken months. We have to bring that optimism and spirit of tackling the challenge to population aging, because it will have a fundamental impact on how we provide healthcare.
Yeah, especially here, for sure. John Hamblin is asking, since healthy living, exercise, and more should decrease the number of health issues and therefore frailty, why do we spend so little effort publicizing and encouraging seniors to live better?
Yeah, so if this could be done by exhortation, that would have happened now. What you need is this has to be broad-based, and I was careful to use the word, we need cities and structures and villages and places where we're nudged towards exercise, where we're nudged towards social engagement. So contrast that with the usual suburb that goes up with the, the vast sidewalks and the huge front lawns and the no porches out front that you can sit and engage with your neighbors, and every tree mowed down for miles around, and difficulties shoveling the snow, and putting up a house that has this big front door that opens up right into your house as though you live in California or someplace, right? And a porch that stops, and you have stairs outside. I mean, how stupid is that, right? But it's been the way that we've done it, that we haven't built for aging. So we have a housing stock that still has outside steps, as opposed to having the steps inside. So you don't have to shovel those off or fall down on them. You get up. We've had garages that are that don't necessarily allow someone to get out of their car in the rain with their groceries and go inside in a door inside the house. That's quite a luxury, the way we've done things. There's a million ways that we were going to have to change to have that done. I don't think we can entirely rely on the market to do that, but I think we need to take some lesson from the way we're trying to, very late in the game again, deal with climate change. So there's going to be government incentive programs to do the uh, uh, solar energy and the thousand of things that need to be done, and there will be expertise that's built up in all of that. But right now, how easily can you find a builder who can do that compared to a builder who can put up the house in the way that we've always put up the houses, right? There's huge changes that are needed, not just when people get older, but as they're approaching old age, as it becomes plausible, not some far off mystery.
New way of thinking. I'm going to do one more question before I ask a question, and then we'll end. This question is, how do our single disease-focused healthcare system, manifest in problems as we age?
So there's a few ways. So number one is that before we get to the hospital, one of the things you see is polypharmacy. So you have a pill for every ill, but there's a point at which that becomes a problem in and of itself. But it's an indication of what happens when no one is really empowered to look at the entire patient and the entire burden of drugs that they're on and say, we really shouldn't go beyond this number. The number is about 7, by the way. We really shouldn't go beyond that. And our first attempts to deal with this have been stumbles, right? The first attempts, people said, we have never used this drug and such. But, and that may be the right way. We don't have the data yet to understand that. But it may also be that, use any 7 drugs you want, but don't use more than that. And don't use 7 if you could use 6, and 6 if you could use 5. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done in respect of this. Within the hospital itself, we've had huge success, right? If you've got a particular single problem wrong with you. I was at the medical grand rounds on Tuesday, where they talked about aortic valve replacement, and it's a procedure that used to be require surgery and can be done through an opening in the skin. It's extremely clever, extremely complicated, but we can do it here now. And the title of the rounds was, Mick Jagger had his tabby, can I have mine too? And the answer is more or less, if you dance as well as Mick Jagger did before, you're going to do very well. If not, it's going to be trickier. And we have to figure those things out. And we're only beginning to figure that out now. So for sure, there are times when we absolutely value single system expertise, right? If you're going to have that done, have it done by someone like the young fellow that we saw, who multiply trained in years, even after he's a cardiologist, to get to know how to do this very well. Those are the people that you want to have to do that work. But if you've got 10 other things wrong with you as well, and one of them is your heart, we probably want to have people who are able to focus more on the entire patient. Now, that may mean we need to develop subspecialties like geriatric cardiology or geriatric nephrology. I picked those out because they're the two kind of most highly paid medical specialties. They're where the cool kids go. And if people see the cool kids are actually doing geriatrics, then maybe everybody else can do it too. So I think we're going to need to really fundamentally think about how we make that fit between the thing that would be helpful in and of itself and the whole set of things that you need. Again, this will not happen overnight. It won't happen by exhortation. we need to bring to bear all the forces that we bring to bear when we're trying to change anything at scale, and that includes market forces. So we're going to have to, this will have to happen by serious thought. It won't just happen naturally.
Exactly. So my question is, when you were talking about aging starting in cells, so how about the business of what you think? Does it matter? There's so much being said in certainly the alternative segments about the mind-body connection. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I'm persuaded there's a mind, I'm persuaded there's a body, I'm persuaded that you need to have a brain functioning a particular way to have a mind that functions in a particular way, but I don't get more reductionist than that, just for anyone who's into all that. So the empirical data do not lend a great deal of support to the notion that if you have just a good health attitude, if you think your health is excellent, that you're going to do better than someone who thinks that their health is not so good. It's always better to think your health is good than it's not. Where you have to look at it and get some nuance is that if you've got two people who are equally frail, the person who feels more positive has a very small survival advantage compared to the one who does not. So there's something to do with outlook, but it's much less than we thought before we could usefully grade the degree of frailty. That's one of the disappointing aspects of doing this work.
I wish it was kind of like a magic wand. I'm going to think it and it'll be so. But unfortunately, I know from personal experience it's not. So I would like to thank you very much, rock star, Dr. Kenneth Rockwood, for this really informative session on frailty and aging. You've given us so much to think about. So on behalf of everyone, thank you very, very much.
Thank you all. I'm really glad for the opportunity. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.